My name is Les, and if you've been following along and seen some of my earlier videos, that's great. Welcome back. And if you're joining me for the first time, that's outstanding. I'm glad you're here. I will try not to disappoint you. We're studying parables and stories about Jesus mostly, but occasionally there will be an interesting story from the Old Testament that we might look into. So let's get started. There's an incident in the 8th chapter of the Gospel of John we're going to look at today. It's often called something like the woman caught in adultery. So let's just get into it. Early in the morning, Jesus came again to the temple, and all the people came to see him and sat down, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And placing her in the middle of the group, one of the Pharisees said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery." So the scene had been set. We might ask the question, why put the woman in the middle of this group of people who had come to see Jesus and hear him teach? Could it be to further humiliate her? Could it be just to upstage Jesus and take control of the narrative? The religious leaders did not care about the woman. Women were poorly regarded in that time and culture. They had babies, they cooked, they kept the household running while the men worked to make a living. There was sharp division of labor in those days by gender. Women had their role and the men had theirs. Everyone in those days, men and women alike, worked very hard just to survive. Community was important, family was important. Children worked when they were old enough. Women were virtually property, and their only value lay in the role that they played. So when the Pharisees put the women in the middle of the group, it was that frame of mind. And telling all those that were watching, she didn't really matter to them. This was a religious theater, pure and simple. The woman was a token, a pawn on this chessboard, and nothing more. So let's go on with the story. So placing the woman in the middle of the group, the Pharisees said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What do you say?" And here we arrive at the point of all this, at least in the eyes of the religious leaders. Here's a woman, a sinner, and we need to punish her. To them, it was just that simple, mere cause and effect. You do this, we punish you as an example to the others. The law of Moses was the hammer they wielded to maintain their power over the people. It was not complicated at all. They had the same iron grip over people that the church had over their people in the Middle Ages. They could read and write, but their congregations, for the most part, couldn't. Literacy in both eras being in the neighborhood of 5 to 10%. So in synagogues and the churches, the same power dynamic was at work. The leader said it, and the followers believed it. And the religious leaders were right. Well, half right. What the law actually said in Leviticus 20:10 was that, and I quote, "Both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death." So the woman and the man were supposed to be put to death, which may cause you to wonder, where was the man? Well, it's a good catch on your part. So where was the man? Adultery was not a thing committed by just one person, so clearly the man was there. And this account says the woman was caught in the very act, not an hour later, after the man and woman may have gone their separate ways. So the question remains, living in the minds of the listeners and readers, where was he? This is not a offense where religious law could find one party more guilty than the other. Another question that might be asked, if she was caught, who caught her? So in many ways, this is an incomplete story, leaving us with many unanswered questions. On the other hand, that is not why this story's been handed down to us. The woman was inconsequential, just a character in this dramatic story, just a cog in a much larger machine. Did scribes and Pharisees care about adultery? Maybe, maybe not. But it was their profession to care about the law, and there were those observing them to see that was done. Their fellow religious professionals, to be sure, but maybe also the crowd that had shown up to hear Jesus. And so the account of this story has everything to do with Jesus and little to do with any violation of the law of Moses. This was a religious performance, and the religious officials were testing Jesus when they asked him point blank, "What do you say?" So with that background information, I'll go on with the scriptural account in the 8th chapter of John. They said this to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. Now that simple phrase, "he was without sin among you," turned the tables on the religious professionals in a way they weren't expecting. Turned this carefully choreographed religious theater aimed at the woman into something else entirely. It made it personal, a moment for reflection. None of them were without sin, and if they cast the first stone, that to all the others, "I'm without sin." And none of them wanted to be so blatantly hypocritical, so they left slowly and thoughtfully. And it says that the older ones left first. And we might ask, why is that? There seems to be a presumption in the Bible, and maybe today, that with age comes wisdom. And wisdom is, among other things, not kidding yourself about who you are and what you're doing. So maybe they knew they couldn't participate in this sham of a religious show. Maybe they saw this finally for what it was and were a bit ashamed of what they'd set out to do. So they left. And the younger among them, who'd been taught to respect their elders, followed the examples and left as well. Jesus was then left alone with the woman standing before him. So we go on with the scripture. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "And neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more." "I don't condemn you, go and sin no more." The very last words of that story. Now, what did the woman do when this was over? Did she become a follower of Jesus? Given the status of women in that ancient culture, this might very well be the first time she had been treated kindly by a man. Kindness can change a person. And the rarer kindness is, the greater the impression it makes. So Jesus didn't just see a woman who'd acted sinfully, but the woman's humanity. And one of the man. For all we know, he was caught as well and taken into custody by other religious leaders. We just don't know that. The writer of the story must have decided that it just had the right number of characters to make the point, and this tiny drama was intended to make. Jesus was a threat to the religious order of that day, and they needed to be rid of him. Eventually, of course, they would succeed. Just not today. It's widely agreed upon by scholars and theologians this story wasn't in the earliest version of John's Gospel. There are differences in style, the use of Greek words that the Apostle John didn't use elsewhere, such as the Greek word translated wrote in the 6th verse, katagraphein, which is used only once in the entire New Testament. Katagraphein means to write down a record against someone. It is a legal term. Some think that this story might have been from an oral tradition. Remember the low literacy rates in those days. Some think it might have come from another gospel altogether, because there were dozens of gospels circulating in those days besides the 4 whose names we know. Or it might have been from a different document altogether, inserted by anonymous scribes in the 4th or 5th centuries. In any case, it's unlikely that we will ever know. It is thought-provoking, though. Shows us that authentic faith has a role to play in challenging the religious traditions, just as Isaiah and the other prophets did. The greater question might be, why was it excluded? Some thought it presented Jesus as saying, that adultery is no longer a sin. There are people who think it belongs in the Bible and people who think that it doesn't. Questions that have no answers. So that's it for today. That is our look at the story in the 8th chapter of John, known as the woman caught in adultery. It is a story of religious hypocrisy and an eager rush to judgment. It's also a story of mercy and compassion and forgiveness. It is a window into that time and place, but also a mirror that asks us who we are and who it is that we want to be. If you found this enlightening, informative, valuable to you in any way, please hit subscribe that you'll be notified of my next video, which will be about the cleansing of the temple, one of the few incidents written about in all 4 Gospels, and its curious relation to the cursing of the fig tree. Thank you.